What truly defines loneliness when you have everything? Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, felt its icy grip even amidst the gleaming towers of his empire. Every day he walked through a city that hummed with the lives he had, in many ways, shaped. Yet he felt utterly disconnected from it all. His tailored suits and polished shoes were a uniform of success, but beneath them, a profound emptiness echoed. His ritual was always the same: a brief escape to the quiet park bench overlooking the bustling city. It was here, surrounded by the laughter of strangers and the distant drone of traffic, that the facade of the powerful CEO crumbled. He would watch families, couples, and friends, a silent observer yearning for a connection he believed he had lost, or perhaps never truly found. The weight of his world, not of business but of solitude, pressed down on him with crushing force. Today, however, a small, unexpected shadow fell across his path. He looked up, his usual carefully constructed wall of indifference about to be challenged by the most unlikely of encounters. A pair of bright, inquisitive eyes met his, the kind that saw past the expensive suit and straight into the weary soul beneath. Standing before him was a little girl, no older than 7, clutching a worn teddy bear. Her dress, though simple, was clean, and her smile, though tentative, held an infectious warmth that was a stark contrast to Alexander's somber mood. He braced himself for the usual request for spare change, a common occurrence in this public space. Instead, she simply sat beside him, her small legs swinging freely, and after a moment of comfortable silence, she spoke. "You look lonely," she observed, her voice soft but direct. "You can be in our family if you want." The words, so simple yet so profound, hit Alexander like a physical blow. He, the man who commanded thousands, who dined with world leaders, was being offered a place by a child. His mind reeled. Loneliness was a secret he guarded fiercely, a weakness he refused to acknowledge even to himself. Yet, this little girl, with her innocent gaze, had seen it instantly. Who was she, and why was she offering such an extraordinary and utterly unexpected invitation? Before Alexander could formulate a response, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile approached. "Lily, there you are," she said, her voice warm, then turned to Alexander. "I apologize, sir. She has a habit of making new friends." Alexander merely managed a nod, still processing the child's audacious offer. Lily, however, was undeterred. "He's lonely, Mama. I told him he could be in our family." The woman's smile softened further as she looked at Alexander, a hint of understanding in her gaze. Alexander found himself captivated by the easy warmth between mother and daughter. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, transactional relationships that filled his own life. He watched them share a small, tattered book, their heads bent together in quiet joy. For a fleeting moment, he felt a pang, not of envy, but of a deep, aching longing for something he couldn't quite name, something that radiated from this simple, loving interaction. It was a kind of richness that all his wealth couldn't buy. As they prepared to leave, Lily turned back to him, her eyes serious. "You think about it, okay?" she said, then skipped off, leaving Alexander alone once more. But this time, the solitude felt different. It was no longer just an empty void, but a space filled with a lingering question. Could such an offer truly be real? The encounter with Lily and her mother rattled Alexander more than any hostile takeover bid ever had. He returned to his opulent penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like distant mocking stars. The vastness of his living space, usually a symbol of his achievement, now felt like a gilded cage. He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid doing little to warm the chill in his soul. Memories, long buried under layers of ambition and success, began to surface. He saw himself as a young boy, small and often overlooked, yearning for the kind of unconditional love Lily had just extended. His own childhood had been a landscape of grand expectations and emotional neglect, where affection was conditional on achievement. The family, he knew, was a structure of obligation, not a haven of warmth. This early conditioning had driven him to build an empire, but it had also hollowed out the very core of his being. He stared out at the city, a profound sense of loss washing over him. The little girl's words, "You can be in our family if you want," resonated in the hollow chambers of his heart. It was a phrase he'd never heard directed at himself, not genuinely. Could he, Alexander Sterling, truly want that? And if so, what would it even mean to accept? The next day, Alexander found himself back at the park bench, a subconscious pull drawing him there. He told himself it was just a coincidence, a break from the relentless demands of his work. But as he sat, he found his eyes scanning the playground, searching for a flash of a bright dress, the bounce of a small head. The cynical part of him scoffed. This was ridiculous. He was a CEO, not some lonely old man yearning for childhood companionship. Yet when he saw them, Lily and her mother, a quiet warmth spread through his chest, a sensation so unfamiliar it almost startled him. Lily, noticing him, waved enthusiastically and dragged her mother over. "He came back, Mama," she announced triumphantly. Alexander felt a faint blush creep up his neck, an emotion he hadn't experienced in decades. Lily's mother, Maria, smiled warmly. "I'm Maria, and this is Lily," she offered, extending a hand. Her touch was gentle, non-judgmental. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alexander Sterling, the titan of industry, felt a sliver of genuine hope. It was a fragile, unfamiliar feeling, but it was there, flickering like a small candle in the darkness. What would happen if he truly opened himself up to this strange, unexpected connection? Maria, noticing Alexander's slight hesitation, gently offered, "We're about to have a picnic lunch. There's plenty to share if you'd like to join us." Alexander's initial reaction was to decline politely, to maintain the carefully constructed distance he always kept. But Lily's expectant gaze, combined with a strange, compelling curiosity, made him hesitate. He looked down at his designer watch, then back at the simple, inviting spread on their picnic blanket. "Thank you," he found himself saying, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. He sat down, awkwardly at first, on the edge of the blanket. Lily immediately offered him a sandwich, meticulously cut into triangles, and a juice box. Maria engaged him in light conversation, not about his wealth or position, but about the simple joys of the park, the changing seasons, and Lily's latest drawings. Alexander, used to conversations steeped in corporate strategy and market trends, found this gentle rhythm disarming. He watched Lily tell a fantastical story about her teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles, coming to life, her eyes wide with unbridled imagination. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Alexander's lips. This small, unexpected lunch felt more nourishing than any Michelin-starred meal he'd had recently. He realized, with a jolt, how desperately he had yearned for this kind of simple human interaction. And as the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows, a new question emerged in his mind. Could this fleeting moment truly grow into something more substantial? Over the next few weeks, Alexander found himself drawn to the park more and more often. He learned about Lily's school, her favorite colors, and her dreams of becoming an astronaut. He learned about Maria's quiet strength, her work as a freelance illustrator, and the small, meaningful ways she created a loving home for Lily. He never spoke of his own world, his empire, his immense wealth. In the park, he was simply Alexander, a man who enjoyed their company. One afternoon, as Lily chased pigeons, Maria turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Alexander," she began, her voice softer than usual, "there's something I need to tell you. Something important about Lily and about her father." Alexander tensed. He had often wondered about Lily's father, about the missing piece of their small family. He braced himself for a story of loss, perhaps a painful separation, or even an absence. But the truth Maria unveiled was far more complex, more heartbreaking, and entirely unexpected, weaving a thread of vulnerability and a profound secret into the burgeoning tapestry of their connection. Alexander felt a cold dread creep over him, wondering if this secret would shatter the fragile peace he had found with them. Maria explained, her voice low and laced with a quiet sorrow, that Lily's father had been a brilliant but deeply troubled artist. He had struggled with addiction, a battle he ultimately lost, leaving Maria to raise Lily alone. What made the revelation even more complex was that he had been an employee of Sterling Industries, working in their creative design department years ago. Maria had always kept this a secret, protecting Lily from the painful truth and fearing judgment. Alexander listened, stunned. The man he unknowingly employed had been the father of the little girl who had offered him a place in her family. A strange, heavy coincidence settled in the air between them. He thought of his own company's sometimes ruthless nature, the high demands, the pressures that could break even the strongest individuals. Had his empire, in some indirect way, contributed to this man's downfall? A wave of guilt, sharp and unwelcome, washed over him. Maria watched his reaction carefully, her expression a mix of apprehension and quiet strength. She had laid bare a profound truth, and now the weight of their fragile connection rested on Alexander's response. Would this revelation push him away, or would it, unexpectedly, draw him even closer into the complex web of their lives? The revelation about Lily's father being a former employee, coupled with his tragic end, plunged Alexander into a period of deep introspection. He reviewed the old HR files, finding the name Daniel Miller. The reports detailed his talent, his initial promise, and then the gradual decline, the missed deadlines, the eventual termination. Alexander remembered the stringent policies he himself had implemented to optimize efficiency, policies that perhaps offered little compassion for those struggling. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, not directly for Daniel's addiction, but for the unforgiving environment that might have exacerbated it. The ghost of guilt settled heavily on his shoulders. He, the man who prided himself on creating opportunities, had perhaps inadvertently contributed to the destruction of one life, the same life that had then brought forth the child now offering him solace. The irony was brutal, almost poetic. He began to see his empire not just as a monument to his success, but as a complex ecosystem with unseen casualties. This realization, spurred by a small girl's innocent offer, was reshaping his entire perspective. Could he truly accept comfort from the very family he might have, in some distant way, hurt? Alexander didn't recoil. Instead, the revelation solidified something within him. He saw Maria's strength, her unwavering love for Lily, and Daniel's lost potential. He recognized the stark contrast between the cutthroat world of his business and the genuine warmth he now craved. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but perhaps he could shape a different future. He began, subtly at first, to offer support. He connected Maria with a gallery owner he knew, admiring her artistic talent. He ensured Lily had access to resources for her education, anonymously, of course. He still didn't reveal his true identity as Alexander Sterling, CEO. He feared that once they knew, the pure, unburdened connection they shared would be tainted by his wealth and his past. He wanted their friendship to be based on who he was, not what he had. But the lines were blurring, and the secret of his identity felt like a ticking time bomb. One evening, as he watched Lily draw a picture of them all, herself, Maria, and Alexander, he felt a profound sense of belonging. It was a feeling more valuable than any corporate acquisition. Yet the weight of his unrevealed identity grew heavier, making him wonder if he was building a genuine connection or merely a temporary illusion that could shatter at any moment. The inevitable happened during a charity gala hosted by Sterling Industries. Maria, having secured a commission to paint a large mural for the event, brought Lily along. Alexander, attending in his official capacity, was mingling with dignitaries when he saw them. Lily, bright-eyed and excited, pointed across the room. "Mama, look! It's Alexander!" she exclaimed, her voice carrying through the elegant ballroom. Maria followed her gaze, and her eyes widened in shock as they landed on the man at the podium, the very same man she knew from the park bench, now commanding the room as Alexander Sterling, CEO. A hush fell over Maria. The pieces clicked into place. The expensive suit he wore even in the park, the air of quiet authority, the subtle ways he had helped. Betrayal, confusion, and a painful understanding warred on her face. Alexander, seeing her expression, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The moment he had dreaded had arrived. The secret was out, and with it, the potential for everything he had built with them to come crashing down. He saw the pain in Maria's eyes, the bewilderment in Lily's, the easy camaraderie of the park, the shared laughter, the quiet confidences. All of it suddenly seemed fragile, built on a foundation of omission. How could he possibly explain? Maria, gathering Lily close, approached him, her face a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "You're Alexander Sterling?" she whispered, the name of his company. The name that had once employed her husband, now connected to the man who had become a friend. Lily, sensing the shift in her mother's demeanor, looked between the two, her innocent eyes questioning. Alexander tried to speak, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? That he hadn't wanted to reveal his wealth, that he feared it would change everything? It sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Maria's voice, though quiet, was sharp with pain. "Why didn't you tell us? Were we just a game to you, a charity project?" The accusations, though unspoken, hung heavy in the air. Alexander felt the weight of her words, the sting of her perceived betrayal. He saw the trust he had so carefully cultivated evaporate in her eyes. He had wanted to protect their connection, but in doing so, he had inadvertently jeopardized it entirely. The gala continued around them, a blur of polite smiles and clinking glasses. But for Alexander, the world had narrowed to this single, agonizing moment. The silence that followed Maria's question was deafening, a chasm opening between them. Could he ever bridge this divide? Alexander didn't offer excuses. He offered the truth, as raw and vulnerable as he could make it. He spoke of his own profound loneliness, of the walls he had built, and of the fear that his identity would scare them away or taint their genuine connection. He confessed his guilt over Daniel, acknowledging the part his company's culture might have played. He didn't ask for forgiveness, but for understanding. He simply laid bare his soul, something he hadn't done with anyone, ever. Maria listened, her anger slowly giving way to a weary comprehension. She saw the genuine pain in his eyes, the sincere regret. Lily, confused by the adult emotions, gently touched Alexander's hand. "Are you sad, Alexander?" she asked, her simple question cutting through the tension. Her innocent concern seemed to break the spell. Maria looked at Lily, then back at Alexander, and a flicker of the warmth Alexander had cherished returned to her gaze. It wouldn't be easy, but Alexander felt a fragile hope stirring. He had risked everything by being honest, by revealing the man beneath the CEO. And as the night wore on, under the disapproving glances of some and the curious gazes of others, he knew that the most important work of his life had just begun. Rebuilding trust, brick by painful brick. The road to rebuilding trust was long and paved with difficult conversations. Alexander continued to visit the park, but now he spoke openly about his life, his work, and even his struggles. He introduced them to his world, but more importantly, he truly immersed himself in theirs. He discovered a joy he never knew existed in helping Lily with her homework, in listening to Maria's artistic visions, in simply being present without the weight of his corporate identity. He still ran Sterling Industries, but his approach had subtly shifted. He implemented new programs for employee well-being, founded a foundation in Daniel Miller's name to support struggling artists, and fostered a culture of empathy within his vast company. The world saw Alexander Sterling as a more compassionate, more human leader. But only Lily and Maria truly understood the catalyst for this profound change. One sunny afternoon, years later, Alexander sat on the familiar park bench, now surrounded by an easy, comfortable silence. Lily, now a bright teenager, chatted animatedly with Maria, who smiled at Alexander. "You know," Lily said, turning to him, "I'm glad you decided to be in our family, Alexander." Alexander smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He had found his family not in blood, but in connection, in vulnerability, and in the most unexpected of places. He had truly, finally, come home. And as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Alexander knew that the greatest wealth he possessed was not in his bank account, but in the love that surrounded him, a love that would continue to grow, beautifully and unpredictably, with each passing day.